Welcome to the ASMR version of Girls Gone Spooky. Just kidding. Amy and I were just discussing how bizarre it is that some people like to listen to people make wet mouth noises.
Whispering I get, but the clicky mouth,
yeah,
it sends
not
shivers
hot.
down my spine.
Yeah, yeah, it's the opposite effect.
Yeah, exactly.
I am not calm. I feel really upset.
Aggravated. Yeah,
I am aggravated. I'm a fire monster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that feels about right. Okay, well, welcome to Girls Gone Spooky.
Here we are again.
Episode 9.
Yes.
9.
Yeah.
We're almost to episode 10.
I know. We'll have to pick a special topic.
I know. Well, we've got some good ones this week. I feel like, I don't know about your topic, Amy, but I feel like mine brought me down a complete rabbit hole. Like there's so much information because we're actually discussing 2 different religions that happen to have a very otherworldly component to them. So I'm going to be talking about voodoo and also hoodoo because I needed to give a little nod to that. And Amy, would you like to reveal your topic?
Sure. I will be talking about Santeria. And yeah, I feel like I say this every week, but seriously, this I have so much to say today. I have 4 pages in front of me.
Atta girl. Well, you're up first, so let's dive right in.
Oh man, okay. I hope I do it justice. But yeah, like Olivia said, this isn't really a spooky topic necessarily, but it's definitely has magical elements, very unique and new to me. So it's a very rich topic, and I think for any of it to make sense, we do need to frame it within its historical context. And so I'm sorry if you don't like history, but here's another lesson.
Welcome to class.
Yes, we're back in history class, so listen up.
Spit out your gum in the back. Stop chatting.
No phones. Pay attention.
No fun.
That's exactly right. So Santeria is an Afro-Caribbean religion, which, by the way, Caribbean, the only time I say Caribbean is the movies.
Yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean. Yeah, we do say Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, but everything else
it's
I say
the Caribbean.
Right.
I have a friend whose family is from the Caribbean, so I'll ask him what the correct way to say it.
Okay, yeah.
And then I'll report back.
All right. Well, I'm going to say Caribbean, but I was just thinking, why? It must have been in the commercials or the previews, that they would say Caribbean. But,
yeah, that's so weird. Tomato, eh?
Yeah, whatever. But anyway, Santeria is an Afro-Caribbean religion, and it has a couple other names. One is Regla de Ocha, and the other is the Lukumi religion. But I'm going to just use Santeria today. And roughly translated from Spanish, Santeria means devotion to the saints, veneration of the saints, or the way of the saints. And Santeria is comprised of traditional beliefs of the Yoruba people, who are from the Yoruba land region of West Africa, which in modern day boundaries would be the countries of Nigeria, Benin, and Togo. And it also goes along with elements of Roman Catholicism. And the website aboutsanteria.com, which was really helpful during all of this, makes it clear that Santeria shouldn't be thought of as a blend of those religions into one single religion, but rather as something that brings them both together, side by side, among people who don't see any contradiction between them, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, and unusual for religion.
Exactly, I know, especially, the Christian and Catholic Church, through history, you hear so much about them just dominating.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see things exist side by side. Like, for example, some practitioners of Santeria might also describe themselves as Catholic and even would go to Catholic Mass or baptize their children in the Catholic Church, but then go home and practice the Yoruba or African-based religion at home. So it's pretty cool. But based on this combination of Catholicism and African tradition, you can probably guess that sadly, Santeria was born out of slavery. The intermingling of the religious practices of slaves brought from West Africa to the Caribbean with the Catholic beliefs of the Spanish plantation owners who brought them there. And the birthplace of Santeria is in Cuba, which was unique in that the Catholic Church in Cuba was actually somewhat tolerant of ethnic traditions and allowed the African residents of Cuba to create their own clubs, which were called cabildos. However, unbeknownst to the church, these cabildos were not just cultural clubs, but they were also secret religious organizations led by a person called the Babalawo, who upheld the traditional Yoruba beliefs. So, in an effort to fly under the radar, the Babalawo would instruct the community to adhere to the Catholic calendar for their celebrations and holy days, etc., so that they could merge their celebration of the Yoruba holy figures with the celebration of the Catholic saints or whatever else and not be found out.
Wow.
So it was a really smart way to maintain their beliefs and celebrations and not get caught, I guess.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So Santeria, they don't have any kind of holy book, and it has survived for all this time as an oral tradition passed from generation to generation.
Holy crap.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they teach in Santeria that every person has a destiny that is predetermined for them by God, who in this case would be the Yoruba god who's named Olodumare. And manifestations of Olodumare are called orishas. And orishas are spirits that can help a person to realize their destiny as long as believers continue to worship and honor them through certain rituals. And these orishas, though they are powerful, they're also mortal, so they depend on human beings to keep them alive, which creates a really close and mutual relationships between humans and the spirits. And these rituals can sometimes include animal sacrifices, which might be performed for births, marriages, deaths, hopes to cure the sick, an annual celebration, or initiation of new members. And the sacrificed animal is usually cooked and eaten after the sacrifice. And it's believed that the Orisha can also eat that, which helps to sustain them. So that's why it's done. And I studied abroad in Cuba for about a month in college. And I think it was just in the last couple of days that I was there, I saw 4 or 5 severed goat heads just on the street.
Whoa.
And I don't know, I couldn't figure out if it was like the annual celebration or if something might have been going on. But it was just so interesting to see that because obviously that wouldn't happen here, most likely.
No.
And now it's interesting to know why it was being done, most likely. So,
yeah.
Very interesting. And, okay, so people who practice Santeria aren't necessarily initiated into the religion, but there are a lot of different names for what level, for lack of a better word, people are at in terms of their devotion. And at the highest level, a person becomes an Olorisha. So that's a little confusing because the Orishas are the spirits, and
Right.
Olorisha is basically the priest or priestess.
Okay.
But they're more commonly known as a Santero or a Santera, depending on gender. There are relatively few Olorishas because in order to become one, the person has to receive a signal from the Orisha, the spirit, through oracular divination that they are being called to the religion, which I assume means that a person would have to be visited by one of the Orishas in a vision. So I don't think that happens to that many people.
Yeah, so it's just like a religion full of like psychics, basically. That's wild.
Yeah, or just very spiritual people who are open to things that aren't of this physical world potentially. That's why I feel like it's so magical, but also, there was a definite like don't think about this as witchcraft vibe in everything I read, but I don't think magic is an offensive term because it's just it is magic.
Yeah, and I feel like that has more of a positive connotation than witchcraft does, even though modern day witchcraft is actually like a religion as well.
Right. Yeah.
Like naturalists, basically.
Yeah.
Did we talk? I feel like maybe we talked about this on another episode that there are, like, I think astrophysicists and other just, I don't even know, like other kinds of scientists that are doing work to investigate the potential of another dimension. Did we talk about this?
I'm not sure.
I can't remember I think if it came up like in passing, but I was talking to somebody about it kind of briefly, and they were saying that like they're actually making progress in proving that it exists. And I was like, no, that's too much for my little monkey brain to understand.
Yeah, no.
But this kind of reminds me a little bit of that, right? Because it's like, you know, there's this idea of someone, I think someone on Twitter made a joke about like, you know, All Hallows Eve is the night when the veil between the realms is the thinnest. And someone was like, it's a veil. Isn't it always thin? That's so funny. Really valid point, but also hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I wonder if it's less to do with how thin the veil is, you know, to use that metaphor, but more about who is on the receiving end and like what space you're in mentally. And yeah, I guess in this case, spiritually too. Because I mean, it's also, there's not a guarantee that if an Orisha appeared to you that you'd be like, let's go.
Exactly.
It's very possibly be like, fuck that.
Yeah. Right.
That's scary. No thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Because I did read that they don't think that only a person who's familiar with Santeria could be visited by an Orisha.
Of course. Because that would be else? Yeah.
So I guess it's like you said, just up to who receives the message and whether you can interpret it as something divine maybe or
meaningful.
If it's just scary. So
right. I'm like, yo, I get night terrors. Like I see some scary shit in my room. So maybe I should convert.
Maybe might change your outlook.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, these Orishas are beautiful. I will talk about them in a second. But yeah, they're very interesting. So let's see. Olorishas, which are the priests and priestesses, they go through a very long initiation period. It's a full year, and they have to adhere to all these different rules, including abstaining from alcohol, not going out at night or in the sun at high noon, no swimming, looking in the mirror, or being touched by anyone other than close family members. And the thinking with that is that during this year, the initiates are really sensitive to other people's vibrations and
Oh,
energy
okay.
and need to avoid situations that might cause some kind of spiritual contamination.
Hmm.
And they also must always wear a head covering and avoid situations where they could become physically or emotionally overheated, because during the initiation process, their heads belong to the Orishas. And in order for the
Oh.
Orishas to bring their wisdom and blessings, the person's head has to remain cool. Whoa.
Whoa. I was
So,
gonna say, I feel emotionally overheated this week, so I'm clearly not in training.
yeah, you can't receive the blessings until
No.
you cool it down
God,
in
give me
there.
the blessings. Gotta cool it. Gotta cool it first.
Yeah, it's a project for you to work on.
That's really cool though.
Yeah,
The mirror, I guess the mirror thing is like because they're portals.
I guess. I don't know.
It's interesting how many themes there are just generally speaking across.
Hmm.
Even if you look at, Christianity, which I feel like for North Americans is almost considered to be like the default
Hmm.
religion. There's so much of that, like, even like demonic presence
Hmm.
in the literature and all of that. It's like there's so many themes, not just across religion, but all like paranormal, otherworldly things. I mean, the
Hmm.
idea of divinity in and of itself is otherworldly. Like that is
Yeah,
paranormal. And
right.
we just accept that. I mean, you and I don't
Yeah.
necessarily just accept that, but
Hmm.
humans accept any form of that and call it faith. And
Yeah.
we're the weirdos for liking ghosts,
Yeah, that's so true. That's a
right?
really interesting point because,
Like Jesus was a zombie?
oh
No
my God,
offense, but
I never thought of it that way. Wow. Yeah.
Jeebus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am Catholic for everyone listening. So I mean,
Yeah.
no,
No
uh,
harm.
no harm, no judgment, no sacrilege,
Hmm.
but also kind of a zombie.
Yeah. It's just really interesting to think about the things we're willing to accept and the things that we're
Yeah,
not.
exactly. And
So,
what's accepted by the masses ends up being normal, quote unquote,
hmm,
normal.
right.
And anything else is abnormal or
Yeah.
paranormal, if you
On the
will.
fringe. Yes. Paranormal, where
I
we
live
reside.
firmly on the fridge. Yeah.
I love it. Love it here. Wish
I
you were
love it here
here.
out on the fringe. Population 2.
Perfect. Let's see. Oh yeah, this period of initiation is also the time when they have to dress fully in white from head to toe. So I think a lot of people have seen Santeras like in
Mm-hmm.
photos, all dressed in white. That's what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing. They're probably being initiated when they're
Okay.
wearing that outfit. Okay, so now let's talk about the Orishas.
Yes,
Um,
please.
So it's believed that the Orishas have children, and we as people are those children.
Oh.
And there are a lot of Orishas, and each of them have very different characteristics and specialties. And I won't talk about all of them, but I want to mention a few because they are the ones that I learned about when I was there studying. So I think they're kind of the more notorious ones.
Mm-hmm.
And the Orishas, it's really interesting. They have really rich and detailed backstories and like descriptions of their personalities and the foods and the colors that they like. Like it's as if they're real
Whoa.
people, which
Right.
I guess makes sense when they're thought of as being mortal.
Right.
Um, but that makes it so that practitioners of Santeria often identify with a specific Orisha who shares certain characteristics or traits with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, if that's the case, they're likely a child of that Orisha,
Oh,
and
okay.
they would then worship that Orisha. So their worship would be dedicated to them. And the first Orisha I'll mention is named Chango. He is the Lord of Fire and Lightning, the owner of fire, lightning, thunder, and war, but he's also the patron saint of music, drumming, and dancing. He represents male beauty, virility, passion, and power. He's proud, fierce, brave, intelligent, and a leader. And Shango's children are like their father, strong-willed, energetic, full of fire, extraordinarily intelligent, arrogant, and self-absorbed. They often have stormy tempers, although they like to have a good time, go to parties, flirt, and dance. They're very charismatic and like to be the center of attention. I just think it's so interesting. It's like as if they were your actual parent. Like, oh, I
Right.
get my stubbornness from my dad
Yeah.
or whatever. My dad,
Right.
Shango.
Yeah. Yeah. I dig it.
Yeah,
I
it's
dig it.
cool.
My arrogance, it's not my fault.
It's just my dad.
It's just my dad, Shango.
Exactly. Okay, the second one is Yemaya, and she is the great mother, and she rules over the seas. She's maternal and nurturing, but also fierce, clever, and brave. She likes the color blue and enjoys dancing. And her children tend to be strong-willed, independent women who know what they want and how to get it. Yemaya's daughters are domestic and protective of their children. Generally, they're calm and don't lose their temper easily, but their temper is terrible when it erupts.
Oh, so it's me.
You could be a daughter of Yemaya.
I'm a daughter of Yamaya. Just
Pretty
a ball
cool.
of fury.
Fire monster.
Fire monster.
But I have some pictures of shrines to Yemaya that we can share that I took when I was in
Yes.
Cuba.
Oh, cool. They're your photos?
Yeah. I took
Hell
them.
yeah.
And it was when we visited this town, or I guess it's a municipality called Regla. And that's like a major hub for Santeria. A lot of people who practice Santeria live there. And it's just across the bay from Havana. Very cool.
Very cool.
Yes. And the third Orisha I want to mention is Oshun. And Oshun is Yemaya's sister. And she was created when Olodumare, God, finished creating the earth. He contemplated his work and realized that something was missing: sweetness and love, two things that would make life worth living. He created Oshun to cultivate those qualities on earth. Oshun's children are like her, lively, fun to be around, but they can also be very willful and too concerned with social climbing. They adorn themselves with fine jewels, perfumes, and clothes. They're sensual, but they worry about creating a public scandal because they tend to care a lot about what others say. Oshun reminds us that we must have pleasure in our lives if our lives are going to be truly worth living. And interestingly, Beyoncé has aligned herself with Oshun and included imagery of her in a lot of her work, especially Black is King, and also in Lemonade, because if you can remember what Lemonade looks like, she's wearing that really beautiful yellow dress.
Yeah.
And Oshun is always wearing yellow, and she loves honey, which is like how Beyonce's fan base is the beehive. So, and I think in Black is King, which I haven't watched, but there's like very specific imagery of Oshun. And
oh,
Beyonce.
You know what? I can think of it. You should watch it. It's really good. I was very impressed.
Okay.
It was like of all of her like movies that are, album movies. I don't even know what those are called, but this was the best, like best
Okay.
production, which is saying something because they've all
Yeah.
been pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But I think I can think of, I'm going to look it up after, but I think
Okay.
there's like a moment I can think of that is probably that.
Yeah. Okay. I think I saw a still of it maybe as she was in a river, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Oshun rules rivers. Excuse me. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, pretty cool. Um, okay, and then a few last things. So,
Mm-hmm.
speaking of music, most of us know the song Santeria by Sublime. And the lyrics go, I don't practice Santeria. I ain't got no crystal ball. And here he's referring to divination, which we kind of already talked about, but it's an essential part of Santeria because it's how the Orishas present themselves to humans and we can receive their messages and guidance.
Mm.
And both practitioners of Santeria and regular people who don't even know anything about Santeria can go for what's called a consulta with a santero or a santera to receive guidance from the orishas. And during these consultas, the orishas don't predict the future, but they can help to set you on the right path if you're willing to listen to them. And the santeros and santeras can channel the orishas in a couple of ways, both of which involve throwing objects, specifically pieces of coconut or consecrated cowrie shells, while asking yes or no questions pertaining to the issue that the person has come there with.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the way that the objects land when they're thrown is determined by the orishas and then can be interpreted by the santero or the santera to convey the message to the person who's seeking guidance. And I guess they say that any of the orishas can come present themselves during these consultas. It's not necessarily just the one who rules or parented, I guess, the person who came there.
I see.
It can just depend on what kind of guidance the person is seeking and which orisha has the answer, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, this was very interesting that drumming ceremonies are a big part of Santeria.
Ooh.
And during these ceremonies, sometimes people fall into trance possession. It can be anyone, but mostly it's the santera or the santeros. And the possession can often look like a seizure or some kind of violent episode, but it's thought to be an honor to be chosen because the possession is that you're being possessed by an orisha. And by allowing them to come into your body, it represents a sacrifice that you're making to them because you're allowing your soul to temporarily depart from your body and harbor them
Whoa.
safely when they come. So during the possession, though it looks violent, the Orisha can comfort and heal the person whose body they're inhabiting. And people that are at the ceremony watching know that the possession has taken hold once the person stops having the violent episode and starts taking on characteristics of the Orisha that has taken them over. So, for example, if Shango came, the person might start, I think they wrote like walking with swagger, being like kind of arrogant, so they can just tell who came. And then,
Whoa.
based on that, they'll take that person and dress them in clothing that suits the Orisha's preferences. And then they'll just join the party. It's believed that when a possession takes place, it's really the Orisha that's there. And it's a really sacred experience because it's just an honor to have one of them actually in your presence. But like I said, people, mostly it's the santeros and the santeras who get possessed. But if there is a non-initiated person at the ceremony and they show signs of possession, they need to be taken away quickly and like brought back to consciousness because they say that the spirit will be way too strong for an uninitiated person to hold an Orisha within them.
So it would harm them.
Yes, exactly. So,
dude.
Yeah.
Excuse me while I pick my jaw up off the floor.
I know.
Whoa.
Yeah, I loved reading about that. There are just so many beautiful aspects to that.
Yeah.
And I just checked Reddit to see if I could find any people's stories about it. And I didn't pick any specific ones to share, but it was all so encouraging of like anyone can be part of this. You don't need to be African or Cuban. It's very inclusive, and the fact that it exists beside the Catholic Church it's just beautiful. I really liked this.
And yeah, so inclusive. I mean, even the fact that anyone can go and do was it called a consulta? Like that's huge. You can't just like waltz into a Catholic church and be like, "Can I do confession?" Like they'd be like, no. Well, you probably could, but they probably wouldn't say no. But I mean, if they when they tell you to do certain prayers and you don't know them, it's kind of a dead giveaway.
That's true. Yeah,
I want to do that. I want to throw a coconut and have spirits tell me what to do.
Yeah. I know that we could probably find people. I mean, I'm dying to go back.
Yeah.
I would go any day.
Next trip.
Yeah.
Amy and I are going to Mexico early next year. So maybe while we're in Mexico, we'll plan a Cuba trip.
Oof. Yeah. I would love that.
That'd be fun. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, which is so funny, like, because now that you're in Canada, people from Canada can just go there.
I know. Waltz on down. I know. It's so bizarre.
We can't. Yeah.
I know.
Very bizarre.
So weird. So you may not have the answer to this, and maybe it's actually just so obvious, but why is it that Santeria has been so, I don't want to say demonized, but like, why has it been associated with witchcraft? I guess because it has that like divination component.
Yeah, I think because the divination, and also I think it's called brujeria, which it just translates to witchcraft. I think it's easily confused, but I don't really know for sure. We might have to do a follow-up because that's an interesting question.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I'm a little speechless, which is rare.
Well, I'm so excited to hear yours now.
Yeah. Well, if there's anybody listening who is a Santeria practitioner, please holler, because we're so in awe with this religion and I don't know, way of life. I feel like I know it's a religion, but it feels like more than that.
Yeah, I agree.
I dig it. So there's a lot of similarity between Santeria and voodoo. Now, let me preface this. Okay. There are so many different origins of voodoo, and it also has a like major tie to slavery. So trigger warning on that. And I'm going to talk about it in a little more detail. So I feel like yours was mentioned briefly. I'm going to talk about it a little more because it's actually really important in terms of like how it came to be. So at its core, African diaspora religions and, a list of related religions that are sometimes called or even mistaken for voodoo or vodou are as follows. So Candomblé Hehe, I believe, also known as Brazilian Vodum, is one of the major branches of Candomblé. So that's like one type of, in this case, Vodou. Tambor de Mina is a syncretic religion that developed in northern Brazil. And before I go on, syncretic, I didn't know what it means, so I had to look it up. So I'll define it. It's the combining of different beliefs and various schools of thought. It involves the merging or assimilation of several mythologies or religions, thus asserting an underlying unity and allowing for an inclusive approach to other faiths. So you'll see that word come up repeatedly in this list. So Tambor de Mina is from northern Brazil. Cuban Vodou is developed in the Spanish Empire. Dominican Voodoo also developed in the Spanish Empire. Haitian Vodou, practiced mainly in Haiti. Hoodoo spirituality, also known as root work, sometimes called Low Country Voodoo. And then Louisiana Voodoo or New Orleans Voodoo, which is a set of African-based spiritual folkways, and West African Vodun, practiced by Gibe speaking ethnic groups of Africa. I can't remember if that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
But it's GBE. So I'm so sorry if I'm butchering that. So I went down like many rabbit holes on this because it's just so interesting. So I picked a couple just because these are the ones that I think we talk about most often: Hoodoo and Louisiana Voodoo or New Orleans Voodoo.
Yeah.
Hoodoo is a set of spiritual practices, traditions, beliefs, which was created and concealed from slave owners by enslaved Africans in North America. So it evolved from various traditional African religions and practices, and in the American South, incorporated a lot of elements of indigenous botanical knowledge as well. So in the South Carolina Low Country, Hoodoo is also known as Low Country Voodoo. Following the Great Migration of African Americans, Hoodoo spread throughout the United States, the Great Migration being the time when slavery was outlawed. And obviously there was a lot of movement of African Americans throughout the country. So practitioners of Hoodoo are called root workers, conjure doctors, conjure man or woman, and Hoodoo doctors. And then regional synonyms for Hoodoo also include conjure or root work. So there's inherently a kind of, just with the terminology, you can see how it sort of gets a bad rap, especially from like a Puritan angle. Conjuring never seems like you're conjuring something good in these situations. But, of course, they were not the villains in all of this. The slave owners were. So there's that. But it's quite fascinating because, so just some really quick like history facts. So approximately over 12 million enslaved Africans from various ethnic groups were transported to the Americas from the 16th to the 19th centuries as a part of the transatlantic slave trade. The trade to the U.S. was between 1619 and 1808, and then the illegal slave trade occurred between 1808 and 1860. So between that larger frame of time, approximately 500,000 enslaved Africans were transported to the United States, which meant ethnic groups including Congo, Igbo, Akan, Mande, Yoruba, Fon, Ewe, Fulbe, and many others. So we're talking about like a massive ethnic mixture of like backgrounds from all over Africa. And Hoodoo was basically created for and by all of these ethnic groups as a form of like not only spiritual survival, but also spiritual resistance against slavery and their oppressors. So they didn't have the same medical or psychological aids as the European American society. So they were forced to rely on each other almost exclusively in most cases. And so they leaned really heavily on things like Hoodoo for protection. So it really helped to unify such, a diverse group of Africans who were, forcibly transplanted to America, which is really quite interesting. And a lot of the practices across different plantations, they were the same, even though it's, people from all over Africa. So one thing that you can see commonly even today is this counterclockwise circle dancing. It was and is practiced in Central Africa and West Africa to communicate with the ancestors and for spirit possession. So it's very similar to the drumming circles, actually. Enslaved Africans in the United States united under the ring shout, which is what that dance is called. And there are just I could not even list out all of the different practices of hoodoo, but I just wanted to highlight a few. So the ring shout is one called personal concerns, which is things like hair, nail clippings, blood, bones, and other bodily fluids that are mixed with certain ingredients for either a positive or a negative effect. These items are then placed inside of conjure bags or jars and mixed with roots, herbs, animal parts, and graveyard dirt from a murderer's grave, and sometimes ground into a powder. The cursed items, assuming it's negative intent, the cursed items are buried under a person's steps to cause misfortune. So you can also prevent from being cursed. It's considered a good idea to burn loose hairs combed or fallen from the head, so a conjurer can't make a cursing powder from your hair.
Just in case.
Yeah, and placing personal concerns in containers and burying them to cause harm was originated in West African countries such as Nigeria and Benin. So kind of interesting, and you can see how it kind of gets a bad rap for that. But the thing is, we pray for good and bad things, like the Lord to smite your enemy or whatever. So I don't know, all of it just feels like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So but there's a lot of really beautiful and rich history around unification of this majorly oppressed group. So I think that piece is really important. Some other practices: offerings, animal sacrifice, claromancy, which is the practice of casting small objects such as shells, bones, stalks, coins, nuts, stones, dice, and sticks for an answer from spirit. So again, very similar to the consulta. Cartomancy, which is the practice of using tarot and poker playing cards to receive messages from spirit. So I thought that was interesting, the poker playing cards, because you can imagine if they didn't have access to tarot cards, I mean, you could make them, I guess, but playing cards are way easier to get your hands on and less suspicious looking if your,
that's
oppressor
true.
finds them.
Right.
And it varied. Depending on location, it's some would use playing cards, some would use tarot cards, some would use a mix of both. So kind of depend on where they were living. And aneromancy, which I had never seen that word before. It's a form of divination based upon dreams. So getting basically a spirit coming to you in your dreams, so similar to the Orishas.
Yeah. So
that's hoodoo. Voodoo is a little bit different. And it's, I don't know, they're both religions, but voodoo, I think, just gets this really weird, it gets a weird rap. So anyway.
Yeah, because we all know one part of voodoo. I think.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And we'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that. And so Louisiana voodoo, which the French word or your phrase for it, I guess, is vaudou louisianais. Yeah, Louisianais, also known as New Orleans voodoo or Creole voodoo, is an African diasporic religion which originated in the U.S. state of Louisiana. It arose through a process of, here's that word again, syncretism between traditions of West Africa, the Roman Catholic form of Christianity, and Haitian voodoo. So actually, I have them switched. Voodoo is actually the true religion. Hoodoo is what people, this is so complicated, what people mistake voodoo for.
Oh, okay.
So it's hoodoo is more of the conjuring kind of vibe, hexing people and stuff like that. It still is, it shouldn't be demonized the way it has been, but voodoo actually is almost it's a proper religion.
Yeah. Okay.
So, It existed from the 18th century to the early 20th century, by which point it had effectively died out, only to be revived in an altered form in the late 20th century. There's no central authority that's in control because it's organized by autonomous groups. There's no like institution that it's all aligned to. It's vaguely monotheistic. So everyone who practices voodoo basically will say, and I was reading through a bunch of like excerpts from like research papers and books written on this subject, just from a historical and like anthropological standpoint. But there's not like, no one can describe what God is or who it is, or if it's even, quote unquote God, but it is a monotheistic religion. However, there are lesser deities as well that sit kind of a level down.
Okay.
So many, similar to Santeria in this way,
Right. Yeah.
Many practitioners of voodoo have not seen their religion as being in intrinsic conflict with Roman Catholicism, which was dominant along the Mississippi River at that time. So, people who are devout Catholics at that time probably would have disagreed. But for voodoo practitioners, they felt like, well, that's a part of our religion and ours is a part of yours. So, it's all kind of the same thing. So some of the lesser deities, there are a bunch, but one of them is Blanc Denis, also known as Monsieur Denis, Voodoo Magnian, and Grandfather Rattlesnake. He's depicted as a serpent and associated with discord and the defeat of enemies. Another recorded name, Dambara Soutan. It may be an additional name for Blanc Denis as well. It's also possible that Blanc Denis was ultimately equated with another deity known as the Grand Zombie, whose name meant great god or great spirit. The term zombie derives from the Congo Bantu term Nzambi, which means God. So we're going to come back to zombies in a minute, because this is actually... We associate voodoo with voodoo dolls, but we actually should associate it with zombies.
Whoa.
So
cool.
Yeah, I have like the creepy twist is coming at the end.
Okay.
So there's also one called Papa Labat, also known as Liba, Labas, or Laba Limba. He was seen as a trickster as well as a doorkeeper. He's the only one of the New Orleans deities with an unequivocally Yoruba origin. So just kind of interesting, because you can see, similar to hoodoo, it's like a mashup of a lot of different ethnic backgrounds and beliefs. Monsieur Ansequet, also known as Anzenker and Ansatier, was associated with good fortune, while Monsieur Agassou or Vert Agassou was associated with love. Verikite was a spirit associated with the causing of illness, while Monsieur d'Embarras was linked to death. Charlot was a child deity, and then there are names of others that are recorded, but people actually don't even really know their associations anymore. So Jean Makalumba, who was also known as Colomba, Mama Yu, Yansu, Samunga. It just like, and some of them are super specific. Like Samunga was called upon by practitioners in Missouri when they were collecting mud. Like, I don't know why, but so there's a lot that got lost in the mix too. So some other practices for voodoo specifically. So altars and offerings. So definitely more traditional in that sense. Grigri and healing. So grigri are charms created to either help or harm. A common charm for protection or luck would consist of material wrapped up in red flannel and worn around the neck. So some researchers believed that grigri that caused actual harm did so either through the power of suggestion or by the fact that they contained poisons, which the victim was then exposed to, like on their skin.
Interesting.
So I thought that was really interesting, that it kind of is like providing an alternative explanation to just like, it's magic.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. One example of a voodoo curse was to place an object inside the pillow of a victim. Another involves placing a coffin, sometimes a small model, sometimes much larger, inscribed with the victim's name on their doorstep. Which, if I got that on my doorstep,
no,
I would join witness protection. Ma'am, you're not a witness. I don't care.
I need protection.
I need protection.
Yeah.
In other instances, voodoo practitioners sought to hex others by placing black crosses, salt, or mixtures incorporating mustard, lizards, bones, oil, and grave dust on a victim's doorstep.
Interesting.
Creepy. Despite its name, the idea of the voodoo doll has little to do with either Louisiana voodoo or Haitian vaudou. It derives from the European tradition of poppets.
Oh.
So I want to do some more research on that. I could not go off on one more tangent, so I just couldn't. But I'm very interested about the origin of poppets. Okay. It reminds me of that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean where he calls her Puppet.
Yeah. Let's add that to the list.
Yeah, exactly. So it's possible that the act of inserting pins into a human-shaped doll to cause harm was erroneously linked to African-derived traditions due to a misunderstanding. It's, of course, it all just is going to get blamed on the less accepted religion / group of people. So here's for the spooky twist. So when I was reading this, I completely forgot that years ago, my brother and I were up late and we couldn't sleep. And we were like, let's watch something on TV. And we were on the Travel Channel or something like that. And it happened to pop up this Haitian zombie story. And it was all about the one recorded case of zombies. Or of a zombie. And so most Haitians actually really do believe in zombies, that a voodoo, practitioner, I don't even know exactly what they're called. A voodoo priest, voodoo priest or priestess, a voodoo priest could go to someone's grave and literally resurrect them from the grave. Wow. Not necromancy style. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there are many unconfirmed accounts of that, but this is the one that is kind of mind-blowing. And I found an article about it from Harvard Magazine that goes into it in detail. So I was like, oh my God, it gives me chills. It gives me chills. And there's a photo of him too. So we can post that as well.
Okay.
So this was written in 2017, so keep that in mind. So 5 years ago, a man walked into Lestaire, a village in central Haiti, approached a peasant woman named Angelina Narcisse and identified himself as her brother Clairvius. If he had not introduced himself using a boyhood nickname and mentioned facts only intimate family members knew, she would not have believed him. Because 18 years earlier, Angelina had stood in a small cemetery north of her village and watched as her brother Clairvius was buried. The man told Angelina he remembered that night well. He knew when he was lowered into his grave because he was fully conscious, although he could not speak or move. As the earth was thrown over his coffin, he felt as if he were floating over the grave. The scar on his right cheek, he said, was caused by a nail driven through his casket. The night he was buried, he told Angelina, a voodoo priest raised him from the grave. He was beaten with a Cecil whip and carried off to a sugar plantation in northern Haiti, where with other zombies, he was forced to work as a slave. Only with the death of the zombie master were they able to escape, and Narcisse eventually returned home. Legend has it that zombies are the living dead raised from their graves and animated by malevolent voodoo sorcerers, usually for some evil purpose. Most Haitians believe in zombies, and Narcisse's claim is not unique. At about the time he reappeared in 1980, 2 women turned up in other villages saying they were zombies. In the same year in northern Haiti, the local peasants claimed to have found a group of zombies wandering aimlessly in the fields. But Narcisse's case was different in one crucial respect. It was documented. His death had been recorded by doctors at the American-directed Schweitzer Hospital in Deschapelles on April 30th, 1962. Hospital records show Narcisse walked into the hospital hospital's emergency room, spitting up blood. He was feverish and full of aches. His doctors could not diagnose his illness, and his symptoms grew steadily worse. 3 days after he entered the hospital, according to the records, he died. The attending physicians, an American among them, signed his death certificate. His body was placed in cold storage for 20 hours, and then he was buried. He said he remembered hearing his doctors pronounce him dead while his sister wept at his bedside. It's just, what?
Yeah, I have so many questions about that. Like,
Same.
if they dug up where he was buried, would there be anything there? Did they do that?
I don't know. I want to say that they did, at least from the documentary that I watched. But I'm just trying to like scroll through because it's a really long piece.
Yeah, I'm
so I don't want to bore you with every little detail, but there are definitely, people have theories about what the other, options could be. So of course, like most outsiders dismissed the phenomenon as folklore. Some, convinced of its reality, tried to find a scientific explanation. The few who sought a zombie drug failed. So people get kind of wacky around stuff like this. But I know I'm just looking for, so at the Centre de Psychiatrique et Neurologie in Port-au-Prince, Dr. Lamarck Douillon, a Haitian-born Canadian-trained psychiatrist, has been systematically investigating all reports of zombies since 1961. Though convinced zombies were real, he had been unable to find a scientific explanation for the phenomenon. He did not believe zombies were people raised from the dead, but that did not make them any less interesting. He speculated that victims were only made to look dead, probably by means of a drug that dramatically slowed metabolism. The victim was buried, dug up within a few hours, and somehow reawakened. Yeah, which honestly is scarier.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to be
that
buried
people would do
alive.
that to create, and to create like slave labor. That's why they're doing
awful.
it.
Yeah,
but then that doesn't explain the piece where he's like, we were only free once the zombie master died. Like
right.
They were tied to him somehow.
Yeah. Oh, that's so weird. So
creepy, right?
I think you probably said this, but when he came to his sister, did he look like himself?
Well, he had died so many years before that I think, she probably was like, well, yeah, you kind of look like him, but it's been so long because he had aged.
Right.
So It's not like he came back looking the way he did on the day he died or the day he quote unquote died. Right. But it's so fascinating.
Very. That's amazing.
Zombies, dude.
Yeah. Wow.
And this is where they originated. Like, I feel like, Night of the Living Dead and all of that. Like, yeah. So we associate voodoo with voodoo dolls when actually that's just absolutely not accurate.
Yeah.
And disrespectful to their religion. And zombies, though, and see, this is what's interesting to me, too, is that I think it said the Bantu group's language, that it means God.
Voodoo means God?
No, zombie.
Oh, zombie. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah,
like, what is the connection there? Right. Yeah, into something evil.
Twisted like what? It into something so bad.
I know. Classic white people.
Oh, typical.
Typical European Americans.
Oh boy.
So sorry. So sorry.
That's like that really good.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that really delicious donut place. Have you been to a Voodoo Donuts before?
There's one in Austin. I don't think I ever went, though.
Oh, it's really good. But now I'm like, ugh, your name puts me off.
Well, they have little, like, shrunken heads on them, don't they?
I think.
Don't they have, like, something in the logo that's very, like...
I think they have a voodoo doll in the logo.
Oh,
and, like, their signature donut is shaped like a little doll. And it has a pretzel, like, stuck in its heart.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's
Oh.
delicious.
But it's delicious.
Now I don't know how I feel about it.
Classic.
Yeah.
Cultural appropriation. Classic.
Mhm. It is classic.
But wow.
Yeah.
These are really interesting. I feel like this was a less spooky episode until the very end with Zombie Man.
Yes.
Claire, what was his name?
Oh.
I already forget his name. Clairvius?
Yeah, Clairvius.
So yeah, if there are any Haitians listening and you have stories about voodoo and zombie encounters, we want to hear it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that was cool.
That was a good one.
So interesting.
And we get to sign off not being scared.
Exactly. And just having
Don't worry, guys. We'll be back on our scary bullshit next week for episode 10.
Maybe we have to make it extra scary now.
Hey, you said it, not me. And it's recorded. So if you try to back out.
Okay, you can hold me to it.
I'll hold you to it. Amazing. Well, please send us any and all stories to girlsgonespooky@gmail.com. And you can follow us on social, Facebook, Instagram at Girls Gone Spooky for both of them. Rate us, review us.
Subscribe.
Tell us what you think. Subscribe. All those things. All those things that podcasters are supposed to say. And above all,
stay spooky.
Stay spooky.
Thanks, everyone.